Now, the second point is about your organisation in that landscape. Because strategy is about working on the system, not in the system. Just imagine that map for the moment, that landscape, and place a box there in your mind. Because that's the position you have chosen. Now here's the tension. The tension is you have something that you'd like to be as efficient as possible. So you set up practices, procedures, policies, processes, plans, programs, all these things that begin with P that make it predictable. Because that's where efficiency comes. And the world's changing on the outside, isn't it? Strategy is about the choices we make about the system, about the organisation, not in it. And one of the things you need to be very careful of is the difference between strategy and plan. Because people will come up to you and say, "Can I have your strategy, please?" And there's a fair chance that when they do, they're asking for your plan. But beware. Because a plan is not a strategy. A plan is how the inside of the organisation is going to execute the strategy for you. It's the implementation of the choices, not the choices themselves. So a plan should contain the choices you make. How are we going to finance this? How are we going to position ourselves in the market? What sort of organisation are we? Are we going to do it with half as many staff as we used to do? And the plan is about executing it. Now, quite often people refer to strategy about positioning. And I've got a few examples here. This is about positioning in the market because you're positioning then to execute. An iPhone is positioned differently to a BlackBerry. A Morgan car is positioned quite differently to a BMW. A flip high-definition camera is quite different to a Nikon professional camera. Both of them can do video. By the way, does anybody know who that person on the top left, top right-hand side is? Oh, brilliant. I'm impressed. Those who invest in Warren Buffett wouldn't necessarily invest in the Coventry Building Society or any of us. It's about positioning. So actually, strategy is very much about choice. Michael Porter will say it's about what you do and what you choose not to do. I chose not to put quite a lot of stuff in here tonight, and I chose to pick off these 4 things. It's also about how you allocate your scarce resources. That hurdle rate about investment is one of those tools. And those of you who know Warren Buffett will say, actually, if you can't reach that, you should just give the capital back to the investors so they can use it somewhere else. The other thing you will hear is strategy used as focus. What are the few things that will make the biggest difference? And strategy is a perspective on things. You're sitting outside the box, looking in on it. Some people will say, can you get in your helicopter? Some people say, can you take the 10,000 foot view? I say yes, but let me also be grounded as well. You see, what applies in the outside world about knowing the landscape is just the same within the organisation. You have to know that and then bring yourself out of it to do strategy. Otherwise, you're not grounded. And that's the danger. I was working for a property development company a few years ago. We were looking at the whole development process from buying a plot of land through to it being rented. It was a complete building. And they actually had a strange model which was including making some of the building. I'll say that again. They had a factory that made the building. They created a room, they furnished it, they put it on the back of a lorry and then stacked them and they did the rest. Unfortunately, construction companies took about 4% of their margin on the things that they provided them with, which effectively cost them about $500,000 to $750,000 per building. So we looked at this process and we looked at the things, the rules that governed it. And there were about 10 different strategies that sat over this process. And one of them was how the building was initially funded. And within that was a clause that said, if you give us money, we will use a standard construction contract. And that forced them to pay this 4%. They didn't realise that that was there. They didn't realise it was constrained. And the people who were writing the contracting, legal and finance, didn't realise that they were constraining and causing it. It's only when they stepped out of the system and looked at it that they were able to unpick that constraint. Now you will have constraints like that that you are working with. People who have been in the organisation only a fortnight will spot them. Once you get past a fortnight, it becomes a bit harder to spot them, but you will have them. Things that you have accepted as the way we do things round here. And my question to you is can you step out of that box and find out and unpick those things that are constraining them? You see, what's going on is that you've got this sort of thing, where you've got strategic choices made, which is operating in the middle. And sometimes you have to check whether your strategy is working or not. And are those things actually constraining your organisation rather than making it better? And the other thing you have to be careful of is that you have strategies within strategies. So, if your chief executive says, how are you getting on with the strategy, is he referring to his strategy or yours? Is he talking about the strategy for the finance department, which is constrained by the corporate strategy? Or is he talking about how are you executing the corporate one? It's a good question because they're nested. They're embedded inside each other. And the top one's constraining the others. Be really careful of this because you are in someone's plan, your strategic rules are in somebody else's plan. They might not have realised that. Do be careful of this. Do be very careful. So to summarise on the second point, a plan is not strategy. Strategy is not a plan. Get in the helicopter, yet be grounded. So you're touching it, so you're familiar. I know someone who used to walk around the nuclear plant that I used to work at. Yes, I used to work at Sellafield. He went out at lunchtime, he just walked around as much of the plant, just trying to understand it, getting it, knowing what every single building was. So he became an expert in it. It's about position, choice, focus, and perspective. People will use those interchangeably. Somebody will come up and say, what's your strategy, what's your USP? Another one will say, what's your strategy, what are you focusing on? They'll use them differently. I almost encourage you to ban the word and say, and specifically, what aspect of strategy do you mean? Because we have this tension between predictability and change, and you feel that all the time.